The Galactic Academy's xenobiology classroom fell silent as Professor Zelthar's mandibles clicked nervously. The insectoid instructor had been teaching for 12 cycles, but never had she encountered a species quite like humans. They were new to the galactic community, fresh from their little blue planet called Earth, and the rumors about them were disturbing to say the least. Today's lesson was meant to be a practical demonstration of predator recognition and fear responses. Every civilized species in the galaxy had evolved as prey animals, developing intelligence specifically to outwit the mindless beasts that hunted them. It was a universal constant, or so everyone believed until humanity showed up. The human in her class sat in the back row looking utterly relaxed in a way that made the other students uncomfortable. His name was Marcus Webb, and he had the peculiar habit of showing his teeth when he was happy, which terrified the herbivorous species that made up 98% of the student body. The remaining 2% were omnivores who at least understood the concept of eating meat, though they found the practice somewhat barbaric. Professor Zelthar had planned this demonstration carefully. She would introduce a juvenile Raxian shadow cat into the classroom, a creature from one of the few death worlds in the galaxy. The students would learn to identify threat postures, recognize predatory movement patterns, and understand the biological imperative to flee. It was standard curriculum, taught to every child across 1,000 worlds. The containment cage sat in the center of the room, covered with a black cloth. Inside, the shadow cat kitten mewed softly, its voice carrying undertones of menace that made the Centaurian student in the front row turn a pale shade of blue. These creatures were apex predators on their homeworld, capable of taking down prey 3 times their size, even as juveniles. This particular specimen was only 3 months old, barely larger than a house cat, but already possessed the killing instincts of its species. "Now, class," Professor Zelthar began, her translator device rendering her chittering clicks into standard galactic common. "Today, we will observe a genuine predator in its juvenile state. Remember, predators are driven by instinct, not reason. They exist only to hunt, kill, and consume. This is why our ancestors developed intelligence, to escape such mindless violence." She noticed Marcus raising his hand, but chose to ignore it. The human had a frustrating tendency to derail her lectures with strange questions about Earth's evolutionary history. Just last week, he had claimed that humans hunted their prey by running after it for hours until it collapsed from exhaustion. The very idea was absurd, yet he had seemed completely serious. "I will now remove the covering," the professor continued, gripping the cloth with her secondary manipulators. "Please remain calm and observe from your seats. The cage is magnetically sealed and quite secure." She pulled the cloth away with a dramatic flourish. The shadow cat kitten sat in the center of the cage, its 6 legs tucked beneath its sleek black body. 2 sets of eyes, 1 pair for daylight and 1 for darkness, blinked at the sudden exposure to the classroom lights. Its tail, tipped with a venomous barb, twitched back and forth in what every prey species recognized as predatory agitation. Rows of needle-sharp teeth were visible behind its curled lips, and a low growl rumbled from its throat. The reaction was immediate and exactly as expected. The Centaurian student fled from the room entirely, his hooves clattering on the floor. Several Verdantians, plant-based beings from a low-gravity world, began releasing stress pheromones that smelled like rotting fruit. The Quellan student activated her species' natural camouflage and disappeared against the wall, while the 2 cricket students huddled together, their antennae flat against their heads in submission. Only Marcus remained unmoved. In fact, he leaned forward in his seat, his eyes bright with interest. "Fascinating," he murmured, just loud enough for the professor to hear. Professor Zelthar was pleased with the demonstration so far. This was exactly the response she wanted to cultivate. Fear of predators was healthy, natural, and had kept their species alive for millions of years. She was about to launch into her prepared lecture when something unexpected happened. The Shadowcat kitten, instead of continuing to growl at the frightened students, turned its attention fully to Marcus. All four eyes fixed on the human with an intensity that made even the professor nervous. The creature's growl changed pitch, becoming almost inquisitive. Its tail stopped twitching aggressively and instead began to sway in a pattern the professor didn't recognize from her reference materials. Marcus stood up slowly, his movements careful and deliberate. Several students gasped, and one of the crickets fainted, its exoskeleton clattering against the floor. "Mr. Webb, please remain seated," Professor Zelthar commanded, her voice carrying more alarm than she intended. "The creature is dangerous." "I don't think so," Marcus replied softly, his eyes never leaving the kitten. "Not to me, anyway." He walked down the aisle between the desks, each step measured and calm. The Shadowcat tracked his movement, its body language shifting in ways that confused the professor. The aggressive posture was melting away, replaced by something else entirely. The creature's ears, which had been flat against its skull in a threat display, were now perked forward. Its growl had transformed into a sound that almost resembled purring, though that seemed impossible for such a deadly species. "Mr. Webb, I must insist that you return to your seat immediately." The professor tried again, but the human paid her no attention. Marcus reached the cage and knelt down beside it, bringing himself to eye level with the kitten. The creature pressed itself against the magnetic bars, its multiple eyes dilating in what any predator expert would recognize as curiosity rather than aggression. Its tail wrapped around its own body, the venomous tip carefully tucked away. "Hey there, little one," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a gentle tone that made the remaining students exchange bewildered glances. "You're far from home, aren't you? I bet this is all pretty scary for you." The Shadowcat mewed again, and this time the sound was unmistakably plaintive. It reached one paw through the bars, its retractable claws sheathed, and touched Marcus's outstretched hand with its pad. Professor Zelthar's mandibles locked in shock. This was impossible. Predators didn't form social bonds, especially not with potential prey. They were solitary killing machines, driven by hunger and territorial instinct. The academic literature was absolutely clear on this point, yet here was a juvenile Raxian Shadowcat, one of the most dangerous predators known to galactic science, acting like it wanted to be friends with a human. "Someone needs to call security," one of the Verdantians whispered, though nobody moved to do so. They were all transfixed by the scene unfolding before them. Marcus looked up at the professor, and his expression was knowing in a way that made her deeply uncomfortable. "Professor, this little guy is terrified. He's just a baby, separated from his mother in a strange place with strange smells and strange creatures. The aggression you saw was fear, not predatory instinct." "That's absurd," Professor Zelthar protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "Predators don't experience fear. They inflict it." "On Earth," Marcus said, still keeping his voice soft and calm, "we have a saying. The only thing more dangerous than a predator is a frightened predator. But we also understand that predators are just animals trying to survive, same as anything else. They're not evil. They're not mindless. They're just filling their niche in the ecosystem." He turned his attention back to the kitten. "Can you open the cage, Professor?" "Absolutely not." "Are you insane?" "I don't think I am," Marcus replied with that tooth-bearing expression that constituted a human smile. "But I guess that's not for me to judge. Please open the cage. I promise you everything will be fine." Professor Zelthar found herself in an impossible situation. Every instinct she possessed screamed at her to refuse, to end this demonstration immediately, and to report the human to the Academy administrators for psychological evaluation. But there was something in his confidence, some certainty in his manner, that gave her pause. Humans were predators themselves, she reminded herself. Perhaps they understood such creatures in ways her species never could. Against her better judgment, she deactivated the magnetic seal. The cage door swung open silently. For a moment, nothing happened. The shadow cat kitten sat motionless, staring at Marcus with all four eyes. Then, moving faster than any of the students could track, it leaped from the cage directly into the human's arms. The Verdantians shrieked. One of the crickets started praying to their ancestral spirits. Professor Zelthar reached for the emergency beacon on her desk, certain she was about to witness a mauling. But the shadow cat didn't attack. Instead, it pressed its face against Marcus's chest and began to produce that purring sound, now loud enough to fill the entire classroom. Its 6 legs wrapped around the human's torso, and its tail curled contentedly around his arm, the venomous barb carefully pointed away. The creature, which moments ago had been a snarling display of predatory menace, had transformed into something else entirely. It looked, for all the galaxy to see, like a baby seeking comfort. Marcus gently stroked the kitten's sleek fur, murmuring soft words that the translator couldn't quite parse. The shadow cat responded by purring even louder, kneading its paws against the human's shirt in a gesture of absolute trust. "You see," Marcus said, looking up at the stunned class, "this isn't a monster, it's a child. Yes, it's a predator. Yes, it's dangerous. But it's also scared, lonely, and in need of comfort. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Professor Zelthar slowly lowered her hand from the emergency beacon. Her entire understanding of predator biology was crumbling before her compound eyes, but she couldn't deny what she was witnessing. The shadow cat had completely relaxed in the human's arms, its body language expressing nothing but contentment and security. "How?" she finally managed to ask. "How is this possible?" Marcus shrugged, careful not to disturb the now dozing kitten. "Humans are predators, Professor. We evolved from hunters, but we're also social creatures who form strong bonds, not just with our own kind, but with other species. On Earth, we've domesticated dozens of predator species. We keep them in our homes, sleep beside them, treat them like family. We understand predators because we are predators. We recognize the intelligence in their eyes, the emotions behind their actions." He scratched behind the shadow cat's ears, and the creature stretched luxuriously before settling back into sleep. This little one wasn't trying to scare anyone. It was scared itself. When I approached without fear, without aggression, it recognized a kindred spirit. Predator to predator, if you will. The implications of what Marcus was saying slowly dawned on Professor Zelthar and the remaining students. Humans weren't just capable of violence, they were apex predators who had somehow developed cooperation, empathy, and social bonds while retaining their hunting heritage. They could be dangerous when necessary, but chose compassion when possible. They understood predators not as alien monsters to be feared, but as fellow creatures navigating the challenges of survival. One of the Verdantians raised a trembling leaf hand. "Does this mean all predators can be befriended?" "Not exactly," Marcus replied, now sitting cross-legged on the floor with the sleeping shadow cat in his lap. "Different species have different temperaments. Some are more social than others. Some are too driven by instinct to form bonds. But most predators, like most creatures, respond to kindness and understanding. They're not monsters. They're just animals." Professor Zelthar sat down at her desk, her legs suddenly feeling too weak to support her. Her carefully planned lesson had been completely derailed, but something far more important had taken its place. For the first time, her students were seeing predators not as nightmarish threats, but as complex beings with their own needs and emotions. "Mr. Webb," she said quietly, "I believe I owe you an apology. and perhaps our curriculum committee owes you a consulting position." Marcus smiled again, that unsettling display of teeth that somehow seemed less threatening now. "No apology necessary, Professor. This is a learning experience for all of us. The galaxy is full of different perspectives. The trick is being open to them." The Shadow Cat kitten yawned in its sleep, displaying its impressive array of fangs before snuggling deeper into the human's arms. It looked utterly at peace, as comfortable as any Earth cat might be in its owner's lap. As word of the incident spread through the Galactic Academy, it would spark a revolution in xenobiology. Researchers would begin to question long-held assumptions about predator behavior. New studies would be commissioned. Entire textbooks would be rewritten. But for now, in this quiet classroom, there was only the soft sound of a predator cub sleeping peacefully in the arms of a human who understood that danger and gentleness could coexist in the same heart. The lesson that day had nothing to do with fear responses or threat recognition. Instead, the students learned something far more valuable about the strange species called humanity. Creatures who could be warriors when needed, but who chose kindness when possible, who understood violence but preferred peace, who were themselves predators, yet showed compassion to even the most dangerous of creatures. As Marcus sat there, cradling the sleeping Shadow Cat, he represented something the galaxy had never encountered before. A predator with a conscience, a hunter with a heart, a dangerous species that had somehow learned to be gentle. It was simultaneously terrifying and hopeful, a promise that intelligence and compassion were not the exclusive domain of prey species, that even those born to hunt could choose a better path. The class ended quietly, with students filing out in thoughtful silence. Professor Zelthar made a note to contact the Raxian embassy about proper care for the Shadow Cat kitten. Something told her that Marcus would be volunteering to foster the creature, and somehow, despite all her training and instincts, she knew it would be in good hands.